Hey, thanks for coming back, everybody. Wow, it's funny because while I was prepping for this episode, I was listening to Polish hip hop and I was listening to it on purpose. And it's really not that bad. And like basically the gist of it is, and I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time talking about Polish hip hop, obviously, but the way it kind of happened was I was watching the Olympics and I was watching the gymnastics, and while they were doing the floor exercises, there was this song that came on that one of the gymnasts was grooving to or doing her little routine to. And I Shazammed it and saw what it was, went and looked it up on YouTube. And that started me down a rabbit hole that happens when you go to YouTube and start looking. Boy, YouTube is a dangerous place. You can go and watch a video on that joint and stay there for hours. And since I'm plugging YouTube while you're there, why don't you just watch an episode of this podcast? You should also download, subscribe, and listen to it the conventional way. But, if you want to see my beautiful mug, hey, you can do that too. But that's what I was doing. And yeah, I do, for whatever reason, I was watching Simone Biles because she's the pride of Columbus, Ohio. So I had to check her out. That's the reason I was watching women's gymnastics. Don't judge me. But the song was the group in particular was Donaton Cleo, and the song was named Broch. And I'm saying that mess. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but I'm saying that mess as if you all are actually going to go check it out. I seriously doubt it. But anyway, basically, all of that has brought me to the reality that I need to find my soulmate and I need to find her quickly, because if I'm spending time on a Sunday night watching gymnastics, researching Polish hip hop, then yeah, I probably need a woman in my life. But it would be cool if she liked Polish hip hop too. Anyway, like I said before, that's not what I'm trying to talk about. And even though, on a side note, I will be talking about Kanye West listening party a little bit later, I did attend that and have a few thoughts. Artists. That's all I have to say for now. Artists are weirdos. But anyway, I'm not even on that. I'm not even on that. It's funny how much Kanye West makes this podcast, though. It's like he's been on maybe 3, 4 episodes where I referenced him for some reason or another. So hey, he must be doing something right. How do they say it? All publicity is good publicity, or there's no such publicity as bad publicity. One of those two or both, whatever it is. But that's neither here nor there. I'll come back to that later. What I want to talk about today is something that I saw a little while ago. I saw an article on Danny Mulder, and I know some of you, most of you, probably all of you, don't have any idea who Danny Mulder is. But for people that don't know, all of you, he's married to the actress Julia Roberts. Okay, and they've been married for 19 years. Their marriage is fascinating to me personally for two reasons. One, when they met, she was already Julia Roberts. She was the big time movie star, blah blah blah, and he was Danny Mulder. And the same way that you said who when I initially mentioned his name is the same reaction that you'd have always upon hearing his name. He was never famous. He was never rich. He was just a guy. I can appreciate that. So this takes me back to the Venus Williams and Levels episode when I talked about women and how they need to stop using income when evaluating a potential mate. And clearly, Julia Roberts is an example of how that works when you don't use money to determine if someone's on your quote unquote level. She was the highest paid actress in the game at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And she was able to look past the fact that he was just a guy with a job. Actually, he was a cinematographer when they met on a film. I don't remember which film, doesn't really matter which film, but yeah, he was a cinematographer. And at first sight, I was under the impression that a cinematographer, it sounds like a fancy enough job. I just assumed that they made bank. They were balling. It sounds like the type of gig that would pay a lot, but it doesn't. And if you just do a quick Google search on cinematographer income, you will be as disappointed as I was when I did a Google search and saw cinematographer income. Uh, if they make 100K, from what I researched, They're living the high life. And if they're making 100K in Hollywood, it's like 100K in Hollywood. That's not balling like 100K in South Dakota would be balling. But with that said, Julie was able to look past all of that. She she saw the content of his character. It's more on that later. Yeah. And not the money. She looked at the content of his character and not the money or lack thereof in his bank account. And look at him now. It's like 19 years later to celebrate 19 years of marriage. Now, if you've listened to this podcast consistently, you know that I routinely highlight divorces of couples that have been married for 20 plus years. So I'm not saying that they'll be together forever, none of that. But 19 years is still pretty impressive. And and thinking about it, if you have as much money as Julia has, her net worth is listed as $140 million. It's funny. On a side note, how often I've looked up people's net worths since I started doing this joint solo. I'm like uh I'm like a net worth addict now, as if that stuff is true. But still, I think regardless of whether it's true or not, I think we can all deduce that she's well paid. But with all of that said, once the prenup is signed, what does it really matter anyway how much dude makes? I mean, she could give him an allowance or whatever it works. Obviously, they've worked that out. So that was the first thing that fascinated me about their marriage when I was reading that article. You know, the fact that she didn't dismiss him because he wasn't on her financial quote unquote level. The second thing about this article and about their marriage that fascinates me, and admittedly, this appeals to the cynical side of me and goes back to the whole content of the character thing, is when they met and they fell in love, wait for it, you probably already guessed it, he was married. And not only was he married, he'd been married for 5 years at the time that they met. So if you're in Donnie's position and you just happen to be a random dude on the set of a Julia Roberts movie, and some kind of way you strike up a conversation with her, and that conversation leads to another conversation, it makes me wonder, like, was he just that confident and had that much game that he figured he'd step to and shoot his shot? Or did it all happen innocently and organically and all of that stuff? I wonder if he ever thought at some point, I know I have a wife. Come on, Ma. You know I got a wife. But anyway, that kind of made me shout out to DMX. It's like, I know I have a wife, but this is Julia Mother Blinken Roberts, the biggest actress in the world. That had to cross his mind at some point, like, hey, I got a wife, but still. It makes me think, if you're Danny's wife, now ex-wife, and you find out that he's leaving you, which obviously is what eventually happened, it's like, do you at least take solace, a little solace, at least in the fact that Julia Roberts is the one that he's leaving you for? Now, don't get me wrong, it's bad all the way around, but it has to provide you with some kind of comfort that it wasn't like the random chick at the 7-Eleven. Like, if I were married and my wife left me for Idris Elba, I'd be crushed, don't get me wrong. But at least, it, it- nah, nah, nah. It's like, when I look at it that way, even if she did leave me for Idris Elba, I wouldn't take any solace in that. It actually probably make me feel worse now that I'm really thinking about it. Because if she left me, what I if any woman leaves me, especially if my wife, what I would hope for would be that one day she'd regret it and just be miserable because of it. And I think that she'd be more likely to regret leaving me if she left me for Tyrone at the 7-Eleven. Definitely, she'd regret that more than leaving me for Idris Elba eventually. It's like, even if it didn't work out for between her and Idris, she'd still have a crazy ego boost from it. and she would have been exposed to all of these different experiences and things in life that I couldn't expose her to just from being with Idris. Just having her walk a red carpet at a movie premiere, like, whoa. Now that's if they had that kind of relationship. Even if she was Idris's side piece and didn't go to red carpets because he didn't want to be seen in public with her, still that life probably would have been more than what she would have got from being with me. Never mind the vows and all that. But just being able to say that she was knocked down by Idris Elba, would be a big feather in her cap. And on a side note, there's so much talk about men and notches in the bedpost and all that stuff, but women take pride in their conquest too. I've talked to way too many women who've talked to way too many famous, who slept with way too many famous people and brag about that. Yeah, so women do that too. The difference probably is that men will brag about sleeping with Cindy from the 7-Eleven in the same way that a woman will brag about sleeping with Idris Elba, and those two really aren't the same. But the point is, women do it too. Going back to Danny Mulder and his wife, but enough about me. But at least Danny's now ex-wife, Vera's her name for anybody that cares. At least she doesn't have to see like Donnie and Julia and their marriage being flaunted all in her face. They at least do keep a low profile and not all over social media and stuff bragging about theirs and all of this and that. Unlike, since we're on the topic, Swiss Beats, who also left his wife for Alicia Keys. Now, understanding that those two things aren't equivalent in who they were. Swiss Beats at least was Swiss Beats. When he left his wife, Danny Mulder was a cinematographer. Not knocking it, but it is what it is. But still, the point is still the same. He left his wife for Alicia Keys, and and he seems to be consistently and constantly flaunting his happiness with Alicia, all in his ex-wife's face. Now, I'm imagining that she doesn't follow him on social media, but Swizz, he's all over verses and all over everything, and he doesn't miss an opportunity to shout out his wife. I'm sure his ex Mashunda is like, yo, enough of this. Turn the channel. I bet she probably never watches verses. I bet she's never seen a verses. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself because if my wife left me and got with somebody who started something, became the CEO of McDonald's, I could never eat McDonald's again. Yeah. On a side note, I dated a woman who slept with one of the members of Houdini, and I could never go to one of their concerts again. So I know if I'm that petty, my petty would definitely extend to my wife or ex-wife. But that's neither here nor there. And again, this isn't about me, even though I keep making it about me. But if you look at it, though, what fascinates me is that both Julia Roberts and Alicia Keys, they were the side pieces in this whole thing. And while this would lead some people to believe that side pieces are winning. And while I talked a few episodes ago about how times have changed and side pieces don't stay in their lanes anymore, we may need to pump the brakes a little bit before we make the declaration that side pieces are winning. Keep in mind now, these aren't your typical side pieces that we're talking about. In the case of Julia Roberts and Alicia Keys, these are exceptional side pieces. Like with with many side pieces, when the main side piece finds out, they'll question like, what does she have that I don't have, and all of that stuff. But when you find out that Julia Roberts or Alicia Keys were the side pieces that your husband's left you for, you wouldn't even dare ask that question. And if you're being honest with yourself in your heart of hearts, you already know the answer to the question about what do they have that you don't. You know the obvious answers at least. I don't even know if you need to bother asking any other questions. And, and so you'll understand. You might not like it. You definitely won't like it, but you'll understand. In the same way that ultimately I'd understand if my wife left me for Idris. Again, bringing it back to me. So the moral of all of this is that if you want to be a successful side piece, however you determine what successful is, you need to be exceptional. Don't be an average side piece. Be an exceptional side piece. Give 100% to your side piecedom. So go forth and be exceptional, you side pieces out there. That was funny. Sorry to Vera and Mashunda, the exes who got left, as if they'd be listening to this podcast. But if you are listening, tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends. And for people that haven't deduced it, I mentioned her name before, but Mashunda is Swiss Beats ex-wife, she was actually an artist back in the day, had a couple of songs and all of that stuff. Obviously never made it big because you don't know who she is, or if you do know what she is, I dare you to name 3 songs that she made. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. Yeah. But that whole thing is weird anyway because Mashunda actually goes on vacations with Swiss and Alicia and the kids and all that stuff. So try to make sense on that. I could do a whole episode on that, but first I'd have to kind of understand it. Actually, I probably wouldn't because half of the topics I talk about I don't understand, and it's probably the reason that I talk about them is because I'm trying to gain understanding. But people that don't know, this thing that I do is just about me thinking out loud, thinking about things that confuse me out loud. Hopefully, you enjoy it. But that's enough about the side piece, and that was the topic for today. Let me close by talking about this Kanye West thing, and I'll try to be brief. But when I say I try to be brief, it winds up at least turning into 5 to 10 minutes. So bear with me. I mean, shoot, anyway. I saw Kanye West in concert over the years 3 separate times. And I have to say that 2 of those times, at least, were 2 of the best shows that I've ever seen in my life. And that's saying something for a hip hop show. A lot of people, when you think about a hip hop show, at least when I think about a hip hop show, and I've been to like over 100 shows, I've been to hundreds of shows, and I'm not exaggerating that. And the thing that was the common theme about these hip hop shows was that it'd be a whole bunch of dudes on stage. All of them have microphones. They're all talking over each other, and they all hold their microphones in a way where they hold it at like here's the mouthpiece, and they put their hands over it, and they're screaming into it, so it's muffling their sound from the beginning. And then you add like 10 to 15 other dudes on stage, and they're all doing that. It just sounds like a whole bunch of yeah. So you get what you get from a hip hop show in general. Now, lately, I've seen hip hop shows that try to do a little bit better, but still, it's the same type of deal. It's the same type of deal. But so to say that Kanye's shows have been the best that I've ever seen, production wise, acoustically, all of that stuff, is really saying something because that's over the R&B shows I've seen, the rock shows that I've seen, the pop shows that I've seen, and I've seen shows in every genre. So keep that in mind. The problem with artists, and Kanye West is a true artist, not just somebody who makes records for a living, he's an artist. The problem with artists is that they have high highs and they have low lows. So if you vibe with an artist, a true artist, because he does or she does something that you really dig, the unfortunate thing is that a person who just makes records, for example, they tap into a well and they'll just keep going with that same formula because they like tapping the well and they like getting what results from tapping that well. What an artist does is they'll tap that well and take that as a cue to go off in a completely different direction. It's like, okay, I've tapped this well, I've gotten all of this stuff. Well, let me see what's over here instead of just staying with that and keeping the formula going. So it's harder to follow and keep following true artists because that's what they do. It's kind of like Prince. Prince made 1999. Then he made Purple Rain. Purple Rain was obviously his biggest hit. And then he just took a complete left turn. And while I personally liked albums like, um, 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 I can't even remember the Prince album. Bear with me, please, because I sexy something. I cannot believe that I am blanking out on a Prince album. Love Sexy is the one I was thinking about. Love Sexy. I love Sexy. Parade, which I think came right after Purple Rain. Didn't like it as much, but just chose to stray to the left and not go back to that formula, which disappointed a lot of Prince fans and turned them off. But true Prince fans, they rolled with him to a certain point. But I think most Prince fans that I know, they eventually dropped off before he passed. They might have all the albums, but they don't know him like they might have known the early Prince joints or even the popular Prince joints. I think after Sign of the Times, I think my interest kind of waned, even though I'm a hardcore Prince fan and continue to listen to the joints. No, I like anyway. I won't even get into Prince. Anyway, this is about Kanye West. But I mentioned all that to say that artists are different, true artists. So Kanye West had a listening party last week at down here in Atlanta, where I reside, at the Dome, the football stadium, Mercedes Benz. It seats 60,000 people. Supposedly, at the time of this recording, he's still living there trying to finish the album. I actually read an article that he's taken up residency down there. Who knew that you could rent out the Mercedes-Benz Stadium for, I guess you can if nobody else has it booked. I can only imagine how much that mess costs. Anyway, artists. So go down to Mercedes Benz, sitting there. Show was supposed to start at 8. He makes us wait for 2 hours. And from what I understand, from what I heard, the reason that we were waiting was because he was still working on the album at the stadium when the listening party for that album was supposed to have been going on. He finally comes out after 2 hours and no fanfare, no nothing. He just comes out, walks on out to the empty floor of the stadium, no setup, nothing. And he performed for 50 minutes, all of 50 minutes. And it was just, they put on tracks to the album and he just, I'm assuming, lip synced the songs while just standing in a circle, walked around every now and then, or the floor of the stadium with one spotlight, and that was it. And I have to say, it was some of like the worst acoustics that I'd ever heard at a concert. Going back to what I said a little bit earlier when I was talking about how you have 10 of your friends and stuff and they all had their hands on the mic and stuff and you can't hear what's going on. It was like the worst speaker system in the worst car that I had ever heard in my life. I couldn't make out any of the lyrics. It's funny. I actually came home and read the reviews, and they mentioned that Jay-Z was on a verse, and he went through all of the songs that he had recorded, including that one. And I missed the Jay-Z verse altogether because I could not make out one voice from another, one lyric from another, none of the music. It just sounded like a whole bunch of jumbled mess. And then what was funny was he did it, walked off the floor. We're all sitting there just like, okay, is that it? It's like, is he coming back? And so it's like, guess not. The lights come up. So we all start walking out. As we're walking out and we're leaving the stadium, the music starts playing again. And this speaks to how jumbled everything is and how you couldn't make heads from tails with it. The music starts playing. Everybody starts running back so they can see what's happening. Did he come back out? No, he didn't come back out. Not only did he not come back out, he was just replaying the album from start again. He wasn't performing it this time. He was just playing it. So people thought that he was coming back because they thought they had heard a different song, but it was the same song. So I'll just say it was far from great. And I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, only in Atlanta could he get away with something like this, charging $100 a ticket and charging $120 for T-shirts with a picture of his mother on it. I'm not paying $120 for a T-shirt with a picture of somebody else's mother on it. And I understand that people are saying that you can get $500 for them now on eBay or whatever. Still, come on now. First of all, $120 for a T-shirt. It was long sleeve, but still, with just a picture of his mother on it. Whatever. But only in Atlanta would you can you fill up a stadium with 40,000, 50,000 people, get them pay $100 a pop, and you come out there with no setup, lip syncing some songs for less than an hour after making them wait 2 hours. Boy, Atlanta is as pretentious as they come. I tell you what. But with that said, really, can how much can I say? I was one of the people there, so I guess I'm as pretentious as they come too. Yeah. And what was funny was when the songs were playing and you couldn't make heads or tails as to what he was saying, what the music sounded like, anything like that. It was just like a jumbled mess. A lot of people were like grooving like they'd had the album for like a month and knew all the joints. They were like grooving to that stuff. They were acting like Kanye West was the greatest thing ever to ever step on the stage in his life. Now he's a talented dude, don't get me wrong, but still, I'm looking over at other people and I'm just like, hold up a second. I know I'm not that old. It's like these people can make out what he's saying. It's like, really? It's like people are actually talking about this is the greatest show that they'd ever seen. Like, come on now. You can talk about the magnitude of the event, but saying it was the greatest show that you ever saw, that's way too extreme. But that's what people do. It's like people kind of refuse to differentiate the event from the performances, and I think partially is because it's a way that they can brag to their peoples that they were a part of something. It's like i went to I was fortunate enough to go to the last Prince concert, and which was also here in Atlanta. It was the late show, and he died like a week later, so that was the last concert that he'd had. And on the magnitude scale, especially reflecting back on it, you can't see, but back on the wall, I actually have the ticket framed back there in up against the wall amongst all of this other framed crap. I have that ticket to that show. So when looking back at the fact that he's no longer with us and that was his last show, the magnitude of that event takes on like an increased significance. But with that said, that doesn't mean that the show itself was a good show. Now, I saw Prince several times, like almost like 10, if not 10 in my life, including that one. And I would say that out of all of them, that was, if not the worst, it was probably second worst. So, but with that said, I talk to people, I have friends, and I see people online talking about that was the greatest concert ever. Now, on a magnitude scale, yes, it was. But on a performance scale, no, it wasn't. So people have to kind of be honest in separating the two. I was so glad that I went. It is something that I'll never forget. It is the most memorable concert that I'll ever see, but not because he got down. He played in front of a piano, did his work, and left. And for people to say that that was the greatest concert ever, yeah, okay. And for people to say that this Kanye West concert was the greatest ever, yeah, okay. Does not compare to any of the other three times that I had ever seen that I saw Kanye West perform. And yeah, but it was an event that is being talked about all over the world and everything. So I can say I was there. I was part of the event. But man, I guess because of that, I can say I got my money's worth. But still, when you strip all of that away and it's like, this is what I paid for. And no, I didn't spend $120 for the t-shirt. No, I did not. But with that said, that is life in Atlanta. And I am Michael. I'm your host. That is all that I have to say for today. Remember, tell 50 friends to tell 50 friends. Like, subscribe, download, all of that stuff. I really appreciate anybody that comes here and listens to what I have to say, just trying to figure out life with me. If you have any wisdom that you want to impart on me, I welcome it. Email me at podcast at datingwhileadulting.com and I will respond to you. Go to datingwhileadulting.com and hit me up there. However, you want to hit me up, I'm available to listen. Yeah, myself or Reggie. Speaking of Reggie, say goodbye, Reggie. What you're not gonna say goodbye to the song? I'll say it for him. Goodbye.